Trying to understand the frustrations of others, I take a moment to reflect back on my own. Not just a citizen observing injustices, but mine as well. The past year and a half, I've been looking upon my relationship to gender and how I want to move through the world. While this experience can often be positive, it often leaves me defeated. Not just the policies in place to protect or not protect me at different levels of government, but incidents on the streets where things have been physically thrown at me or I've been verbally abused. And I ask myself again and again, if things had escalated, would the government protect me?
I think that's the time when coalitions work. That's the time when it takes more than one voice to make government move. And so even starting with other people that are having the same problem as you, or people that have an interest in the problem that you have and having that solved. And people can have different interests of why they want a certain problem solved, but it's the problem. And I would go back to starting with the most local and accessible person. And I do believe in the squeaky wheel. I think the more noise you make, the more disruption you cause, and making it impossible for them to do anything else but pay attention to you, I think your problem gets noticed. Interprofessional collaboration in solving larger problems, and not just solving that one person's problem, but solving a problem that affects a lot of people. Because it's usually more than just one person, it usually affects a population. So, how do we just get in there and solve the problem?
My experience change is really slow. That's good. I'm just saying that's just kind of the way it is that I've experienced it. And if you've changed it at all, that is an accomplishment in and of itself, I think, because that took a whole lot. I think it's the people who change things in government are those that are loudest, continually knock on their council office's door. People will start to talk about you in their own, internal meetings and start saying, well, so and so is still coming and we still haven't addressed this, and how do we do it? And it might not be immediate, but you start pushing, you start changing the tide a little bit, little by little.
Or there's other options sometimes is the other branch of government, which is we sue government, because we found a way that so many of the laws we pass are passed without any sort of mechanisms for enforcement, which is really unfortunate. So for example, in housing, this is terrible because you can get evicted illegally all the time, but to get a landlord in trouble for illegally evicting somebody, you have to take them to court. And if you don't usually have those resources to do this, but on the other hand, if a landlord calls the cops and says, kick my people out, they don't really ask him if he's doing it legally or not. They just help him get kicking people out. So there's definitely cases where we just need to go fight to get those processes. We need to have a process to report a landlord who's breaking the law because it's illegal for him to do this, but there's no mechanism for him to get in trouble or pay a fine. The only option is to take them to court. But when we talk about issues in the streets too, there's often, ways we can look at that too and see is what the city doing in conflict with something else? And sometimes we can try to hold them to that.
Up and confront a problem and you're trying to do all the right things. Sometimes you're there to make friends as well, but also you're there to also kind of learn about what is that bigger problem. And there was a neighbor who didn't understand why there was no trash pickup. Like there was never a street sweeper on her street. And so I tried looking and researching and talking to the Department of Sanitation. And it just ended up, we had started poking at this larger bureaucracy that we were starting to understand together, where it was if you had to sweep one street, you would have to reconfigure an entire region of the city of Los Angeles because their schedule was already so tight. It was an issue of the street length. It was an issue of the hillside. And so I think we found another interim solution where we found a group of volunteers who were willing to pick that trash up on a more regular basis. It's not a permanent solution, but I think sometimes you just start to uncover larger problems.